Voter turnout has been massive in the pivotal race for president between Hugo Chavez and Henrique Capriles. 19 million people are eligible to vote in Venezuela, and the close contest may have energized people as voting lines have been unusually long throughout the nation. Correspondent Stephen Gibbs is live in Caracas and joins us now with the very latest. Stephen, what can you tell us? When did the polls close, and when can we expect a declared winner?
The polls officially closed, Elaine, a few hours ago, but it does seem that some people continue to vote, and there are some stories that people are still voting now. But the main thing that's happening now is a big count, and all the information we're getting this from government sources, from opposition sources, and from the independent observers here, is that this is looking extremely close. We're hearing people saying that the figure could be just 2% between these two men, and that really is an extraordinary development for Venezuela as the country and its people make this big decision whether they're going to stay with President Chavez, that's led this country for almost 14 years, or whether they're going to try someone new.
Well, Stephen, one of the biggest issues for both candidates has been the housing crisis there in Venezuela, and it seems that President Chavez has a very unique way of dealing with this. Can you talk about that?
The housing crisis is one of the great incongruities of Venezuela. Here we are in a country with less than 30 million people, with vast oil reserves amongst the biggest in the world, and yet 3 million of those people live in completely unacceptable conditions. And that despite over a decade of a leftist leader that was elected to help the poorest people in this country. Now, President Chavez and his critics would say this has all been a bit late in the day. He has launched this massive program last year to start housing people. He called it his great mission for housing. And for plenty of people, it is an answer to their prayers.
This is the house that Chavez built. At least that's the view of the occupants of this brand new building in Caracas. There are 92 apartments here. All of them have just been given out free to those that the government decided are the most deserving. People like Francisco Moron. For 24 years he's been without a home. Now he's house proud. He invites us in to see his 3-bedroomed apartment. He was given the keys just last week. Perhaps that's why the novelty of cleaning home hasn't worn off yet. He sat down on the only chair in the house to tell me a little about his life before he came here.
Vivíamos en Roca Talpeya, vivía con mi mujer y mi niño. Y ahí, bueno, se derrumbó el cerro, un desvalecimiento de tierra, se derrumbó el cerro, perdí todo y quedamos en la calle. Y llegó Chavez, presidente Chavez, llanero de los recios. Y bueno, buen corazón, como ese hombre no... Yo creo que en el mundo no hay un hombre como ese. Todos somos hombres, un hombre con ese corazón que tiene Chavez. Yo creo que Chavez todo corazón, Chavez todo corazón.
And just tell me how you felt the first time you walked into this house, the first time you've ever had your own home.
Bueno, es una emoción tan grande, yo hasta lloré. Yo hasta lloré cuando me entregaron la llave. Me dijeron, señor Francisco, pasa por acá, me dieron mi llave. Yo hasta lloré, porque era para llorar, eran muchos años. Pero siempre tuve una esperanza.
Do you think that the opposition candidate, if he wins the elections this weekend, will take people away from their homes?
Es que honestamente se lo digo, él no va a ganar. Él no va a ganar porque es que nosotros somos mayoría. Y llegando a este supuesto caso, que yo sé que no va a ser así, que ya ganar, esto se va abajo. Esto se va abajo yo. Porque por lo menos a mí que me han dado esta vivienda digna para mi nieta, para mi hijo, y para mi hija y para mi hijo. ¿Usted piensa que ellos van a permitir que yo esté viviendo aquí? Ellos van a venir por nosotros. Tenemos un gran presidente, caramba, este es un buen presidente. Nosotros lo quisiéramos para toda la vida. Y que después de él, que Dios le dé salud, que lo proteja. Porque yo creo que para que llegue un presidente así, yo creo que no va a llegar. Van a pasar muchos siglos para que llegue. Que lo que él dice lo cumple. Él dice, voy a hacer esto, y es que lo cumple, no como antes, que no, que yo voy, que los otros gobiernos, yo voy a hacer esto. Cuando llegaban en elecciones, le daban 2 láminas de zinc a las personas, le daban una bolsita de comida, no, yo voy a hacer esto, yo los voy a dar esto, y ofrecieron, y después que llegaban al poder, miran a uno por encima del hombro.
Afterwards, he showed me where he'd been squatting for much of the last decade. It's next door to his new home. Venezuela has the world's largest known oil reserves. Oil has brought President Chavez's government almost $1,000 billion over the last 14 years. But millions of Venezuelans live like this. As elections approach, the Venezuelan government promises that that is going to change. Since what it calls its Great Housing Mission was launched last year, it says 200,000 homes have been constructed.
The whole issue of housing is a reminder of just how politically divided this country has become. The president's supporters say it's been one of his great successes, but his critics see it as one of his failures.
The critical view is that corruption and inefficiency means that the government is way behind on its promised house-building plans. Some also accuse Mr. Chavez of running the scheme in a distinctly autocratic way. Here he is on national television, expropriating private property, some of which will be converted into state housing.
Esa casita que se ve ahí con 2 balcones, y ahí lo que están unos negocios, exprópiese. Este edificio aquí, ¿cuál es?
También es un edificio que tiene locales comerciales de propiedad privada, por lo tanto...
Expropiese, señor alcalde, expropiese, expropiese.
But for Francisco, the critics are wrong. The scheme, he thinks, reflects all that's right about Mr. Chavez's Venezuela.
Y yo le digo a aquellas personas que no creen, aquellas personas que creen que no se les va a cumplir sus sueños, sí, se les va a cumplir. Aquí en Venezuela se les va a cumplir.
Well, Francisco, of course, one of the lucky ones. There are plenty of Venezuelans that are still waiting for a home, and they may well still have a very long wait.
Well, Stephen, while we wait for the results of the election, can you talk about the campaign style of both candidates? You know, there have been so many reports about this being a tight race.
Yes, well, I mean, one of the big issues of this campaign is that Mr. Chavez isn't quite the man he once was. Last time he fought an election was in 2006, and he won very comfortably with over 60% of the vote, with his rival just getting just over 35% of the vote. Of course, the likely reason for that is that he has been suffering from cancer. He does say he's completely cured, but it has been extremely noticeable that he hasn't been able to go out on the campaign trail as he does, frankly, so brilliantly, as much as he once did. Meanwhile, Henrique Capriles, who's just 40 years old, has been very subtly playing on that, going all over this country, right to its most remote regions close to the Amazon, and really showing that he's the fit young man and really giving the message that he's the new beginning, perhaps, for this country. And I think that has benefited Henrique Capriles and Mr. Chavez. It's cost him quite a few votes, probably.
Let's look into the next several hours and into the next day. Can you give us an idea of what we should expect to see?
Well, we're probably going to be up for most of the night as we wait for Venezuela's Electoral Commission to decide who's won this. They are talking that 80% of the electorate voted, so that's a lot of votes that they've got to check, and that combined with the fact it's so close means they have to double check everything. And then we get a result, and then really things get interesting, because this is a polarized country and there are two sides to this, and both sides believe that their man has and will win, and that their futures and happiness depend on the victory of one man. So there are going to be approximately, I suspect, 50% of this country that is going to be extremely disappointed, and that can be problematic in a country like Venezuela.
Okay, Stephen Gibbs, thank you so much for your report.